Hi everyone, we're going to do something a little different in this session. Generally we focus on learning, the next advances in learning, but I think one of the most important things we've learned over talking to about 4,000 customers over the last 20 years is that if you don't have a compelling business case on why you're making investments in learning, it's really not going to be funded and you're not going to be able to do the things you want to do. So what we decided to do is talk to a lot of CFOs, talk to a lot of decision makers, and really understand what it takes to get a business case over the line. And I wanted to share a lot of that with you guys today. So my name is David Mennie. I'm the Vice President of Products and Strategy at Saba. I've been with the company a little over 2 years, and I'm particularly excited and passionate about this particular problem because I think it's one that sort of plagues all of us. We're all learning professionals, but at the end of the day, building a business case is something we can all do, and we often forget what it takes to really get that over the line with the decision-making team. So this is what we're going to cover. We're going to talk about the common ground between the financial side of the business and the people side of the business. How do the CFO and the CHRO find common ground together as a starting point before the business case is even presented? We'll talk about the building blocks of a very strong business case. We'll talk about quantifying the value of high-impact learning. And what do I mean by high-impact learning? You've probably heard about modern learning, continuous learning, the fact that this has to happen every day and be more self-directed to embrace people's development. What I mean by high impact is it's a combination of the formal learning we all need to do as part of a business, compliance for our roles and certification, but also the more informal stuff that we all want to do that supports our growth. And it's not a choice. It's the balance of the two. That's making it high impact. Then assessing your organization's readiness for this. So that's what we're going to cover today. So let's start with the common ground. We've taken a look at the competencies of a CFO and a CHRO and where they kind of meet in the middle. So we know that a CFO is really focused on organizational leadership. They're alongside the CEO and very much can help navigate the business interests of all the different departments within an organization. And on the CHRO side, it's all about leadership and influence. Are we talking to the right people? How do we assemble the right cross-functional teams and get the stakeholders involved? So effectively, the strategic evangelism is the common ground between these two roles. In terms of business stewardship, there's the whole idea of doing this in an ethical manner, by the book, something we can track, something that's really thoughtful. And then of course the CHRO is looking at the ethical elements of this. And it kind of sounds like, hey, you guys are the fun police. This is, I thought we were going to do something innovative and exciting here. Thanks for constraining me. But the reality is it's with the two shared interests that the business actually moves forward and the initiative is actually embraced. From the standpoint of partnership, again, there are so many key stakeholders in the business cross-functionally, and I think the CFO can really help bring those parties together. From a CHRO competency perspective, this is about business acumen. This is about critical thought and analysis and making sure that all voices are heard. And that really leads to the performance management rockstar. This is the shared ground. Everyone's concerned in performance, one by the numbers, one by the people, but a common performance goal. In terms of integrating the organization together, navigating through all the different businesses and the organization itself, this is also common ground. And it's all about the big picture, not about the specific initiative, but where are we going as a company and how can our learning initiatives today evolve into where we want to go tomorrow. And then I think from the number side, you've obviously got the financial and accounting expertise meeting the learning expertise, which really means both of these roles are true professionals in their organization. So a lot of common ground here. So let's talk about a business case. What defines success? Now, return on investment is probably one of the most important things to a CFO, but it's not just ROI, right? We have to find the right information so decision makers can really act with confidence. They have to believe in the business case you're presenting. It's got to be credible. It's got to have, proof points against it, and a prediction of what might actually happen if we fund the business case, I think is particularly important. Now, ideally, you want to show that this will be on time, on budget, and address pains in the business, and I think that's the key. Business pain, not HR pain, not learning for the sake of learning, but you've got to move the business forward. And if you can demonstrate that, you have a really high likelihood of getting the money you need to proceed. So what are some of the mistakes, the common mistakes that are made before you even start a business case? Well, the first is that what you're trying to solve really doesn't address any business pain. It might address pain you have in your org, complaints that the people have within the organization that you'd like to address, but not really a business pain, in which case you're not motivating a CFO to fund that. You might have no clear scope, no clear objectives. I think this is cool technology that our people are telling me we need to use, but I don't really know what they're going to do. That's not ideal either. Maybe it doesn't align with any corporate objectives. Perhaps you haven't actually done any sensitivity analysis or, consulted all the key stakeholders in a business. Maybe you only have one opinion. Maybe you're missing the costs and you've only focused on the benefits. Risk is probably the most important thing to a CFO. And if you haven't balanced off why you're choosing this option, it's not going to work. So where do you start? I think you start with mind share. The more people that you can buy into the overall plan, even before you present the business case, the better off you'll be. You need champions in the business. You've got to look at what's been attempted in the past, why it hasn't worked, and why this option will be better, and really rally the support. Then when you write the business case, I think it'll be that much easier to get it over the line. So what makes a good business case, right? There's probably a lot of you have MBAs, a lot of you have done this, maybe going back to school, you've probably done this inside your companies. But I think this is a refresher on what's really important to focus on, and I think we can all take something away from this. So first, you've got about 7 to 10 minutes to impress your financial team. They don't want a 2-hour presentation. In 7 minutes, you better show me what the value is, and if I'm interested, I want to dig deeper. Make sure you've done your homework. So that summary and project background at the front is really important. Second, you better align with strategic goals of the business. And again, not HR goals, but goals of the business. Have you considered your options? And what do you recommend? Now, don't just show me all the choices and make me choose. What are you recommending? And have you done your homework? Give me a timeline. Because if I fund this and you're not going to be live for 4 years, I'm not really terribly interested. Because as a CFO, it's all about payback. How quick is the payback period? What is my ROI? When do I start recognizing gains over what I've spent? If you can't show me a timeline and a path to success, I'm probably not interested. Obviously, weighing off the costs and the savings is important. I think it's really also important to show how you're going to measure success, right? So not just putting the program in place, that's not success. What are we actually moving in the business, and how often am I going to report back to the business on the success that I've made? Obviously, what are the risks? And finally, how am I going to, conclude this and say, hey, I think this is a compelling business case and I think you need to move forward and approve this. So let's take a look at what this looks like very quickly here. So here's an example of a summary statement. And a lot of businesses that we've spoken with absolutely have these kinds of things in mind. For example, engagement of employees, retaining employees. This is one of the biggest business drivers and probably one of the things that if you can mitigate people leaving a company, you're probably going to get funding if there's anything you can do to stop that. Improving productivity is another huge one. And again, it seems kind of nebulous. We all want to be more productive. But there are ways to measure that productivity increase, and I'll give you some examples of that in a second. And then, of course, reducing costs. Maybe you have several systems doing the same thing. Maybe you're saving administrative time or training time or time for people spent finding information. So there's all kinds of ways that you can justify the investment. Now let's talk about alignment with strategic goals. And some examples here of strategic goals might be reducing product development cycles if you're a product or service related company. What is the cycle time to actually bring a new offering to market? Improving employee retention, as I mentioned, is particularly of high performance or high potential employees is incredibly important. You might also be trying to fill in talent gaps. Like maybe your onboarding program needs to be improved, and this learning initiative is the way to do that. Maybe improving alignment in the business, tracking in the business, measurement in the business. These are all incredibly important things. Or maybe it's investing in leadership. Maybe you have a leadership crisis that you can address through a skills investment and providing rich learning paths for managers. So all these things could be strategic goals that you can align your initiative with. Now, in terms of high impact learning, what are some of the business challenges that it fundamentally addresses? Well, first off, a lot of the workforce today isn't in the office. They're mobile, they're on the road, they're contractors, they're somewhere in the world. How are we going to allow them to learn where they are? So that's one critical problem that it addresses. The second is about on-demand. 70% of people are more likely to seek information from a search engine. Go to the internet, go into Google. They're using their smartphones. How do you support this searching mechanism, and how do you tap into learning happening everywhere? Collaboration. In theory, we're supposed to spend 8 hours at work and 16 hours doing other things. But the reality is most of the learning we do happens on the job. Learners are really learning from each other, and this is going to happen with or without any investment in a high-impact learning program. So how do you leverage that? And then from the standpoint of empowerment, we know that professional skills have a half-life somewhere between 2.5 and 5 years. And really only 30% of workers report anyone investing in their own growth. So how do we actually empower employees and users to actually foster their own self-directed learning? And if we do that, what are some of the benefits we're going to get, right? And I think it's important to demonstrate the impact that this program will have as part of your business case. So obviously learning can happen everywhere. We talked about that. I think the length of the training is also important, that this is a paradigm shift from monolithic classroom level training to short bursts of high impact videos, quick updates, micro-learning, things of this nature. That it's flexible. I could be boarding an aircraft. I could be sitting in a lounge. I could be waiting for my kid's hockey game, whatever it is, but I can learn on the time that I have in small increments. It's mobile. It's in the moments when I need it as a refresher, and it's social. Get credit for the learning you do. If you go out and look at a YouTube video or a TED Talk or something along those lines, you're the only person that knows about that. But if you can share it with others, they can comment on it, you can do discussion, you can rate that content, that's high value, that's high impact. And so bringing the formal learning that we all have to do within companies just to stay in compliance, keep our people certified, and marry that with the informal self-directed learning that people want to do. These are the types of impacts you can get. Lower turnover, like 62% lower turnover. Employee satisfaction boosts well over 60% as a result of this too. And we know that you generate higher revenue. It's actually been demonstrated by Burson that you have 2 times higher than the median revenue if you get this right. So there's a lot of incentive to do these kinds of programs. And there's tons of strategic benefits. I'm not going to go through these in detail, but these kinds of statistics, this kind of data that you can see on the slide is actually freely available and stuff that you should put into a business case to really demonstrate you've done your homework. Now, once you've done your homework and you've got several options, you need to present those. You need to present them in a very cohesive way. And you need to say, again, probably the biggest thing and the biggest barrier to moving forward on programs is you didn't build a compelling business case. Our competition isn't other competitors, it's do nothing, right? So you've got to prove that the status quo is not good enough. And then you might provide other options, and then it's important to make a recommendation, not just to say, here's the options, choose one, but what do you think is best and why? The timeline that I mentioned is important, and this is to illustrate that if the funding is given to you, how quickly are you going to make progress? And this is because the CFO deeply cares about payback period, right? It's not just ROI, but if you have a payback period that's any longer than 2 years, I would not present that business case. CFOs are looking for at least a 2-year payback, probably less. And if you can't show them a timeline plus a business case that is less than 2 years, they're likely not going to be excited by that. So then you lay out the costs. I think it's important to talk about recurring costs, things like subscription licenses and things along those lines. One-time implementation costs and internal costs, training, labor, things of that nature. And you have to do it across a multi-year period because in fact, if you only show year one costs, first of all, the year one costs are usually higher. What is the sustained cost of this kind of program over a 3-year period? That's the way that CFOs think, and that's the way you should present it. And from a savings perspective, you could have savings within your L&D department, managerial savings, employee savings, system costs. Maybe you're rationalizing some systems down and you're removing things, legacy systems, things like that. So present the costs, present the savings, and then bottom line, boom, with impact. Show them that you have a return on investment, that you have a payback period under 2 years, summarized based on the data you presented. That's really compelling. That's easy for them to say yes to. Now, the potential risks are also important to acknowledge. For example, if the implementation is delayed, whose problem is that? Is that ours? Is there a service level agreement with the vendor? You know, who am I going to task with the problem here? Data integration. Is this system going to work in isolation? It's going to work with other systems we have, and how are you going to actually bring these things together? Do you have the team's buy-in? Back to my point about common ground and starting with the teamwork first. You need senior level commitment to get these funded. User adoption. The business plan was great, the software is great, the idea was awesome, and nobody uses it, right? So what are you going to do to ensure that people adopt the software? And finally, the risk of do nothing. If you do nothing, what are we going to suffer? Maybe it's a brand crisis. Maybe we can't retain our employees. These are the things that are important to stress. So the final area is around measurement. How am I going to measure success? And I think the most important thing to understand here is you need a behavior change in order for a program to be successful. So don't just show metrics that have no value, but is that behavior change happening? And how often are you going to report to the business? Every 6 months, every 12 months on the impact this program is having. Not to mention, was the behavior sustained? So not a little spike in activity, but did we get a sustained behavior? Are people staying with the company? Is our onboarding program really showing faster productivity? These are the types of metrics that really matter. And presenting those metrics in a way that are really easy for the decision-making team to understand the impact. Percentage increase in engagement, percentage increase in participation or innovation, or whatever those metrics are that are really important to the business. And then in summary, if you can illustrate the value in terms of providing a sample business case, the outcomes and a prediction of the benefit, as well as the next steps and how we're actually going to take this plan down, again, the timeline that I mentioned. Again, this is what a CFO is expecting. And you can all do this with a little bit of focus. But in general, if you're having challenges with this is what Saba does. We will help you build that business case. As you can see on the right, we have a pretty compelling calculator that we built that basically takes all of the dimensions I've just gone through and allows you to have a really easy business case to present back to your team. So give us a call if you need help. We have additional resources you can use around selecting a learning solution, higher impact, readiness, and these are some of the supporting resources you can get from our website any day. So I'm David Mennie. Thank you for your time today. Thanks.